When I was in prison, we took part in Toastmasters International. We had an outside Toastmasters group come inside the prison, and we started our own Toastmasters group, which is public speaking. And we did this for 3 years until COVID shut down the prisons and shut down the volunteers. My mentor told me two things. He said, one, get to know your audience. I know we got a first-time visitor, a couple people here tonight from my Friday night service. I know you, but I don't know you. In other words, I'm going to ask questions tonight by raising hands to get audience feedback, so that gives me a direction on where my message goes. The other thing he told me, he says, Jack, in your introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them, and for your conclusion, remind them what you told them so they can take it home with them. Tonight, I'm going to do a little different than I did Sunday morning, and that is I'm going to explain the circumstances that brought me to prison, so you at least know where I'm coming from. Then I'm going to show you the reasons why I ended up writing a devotional on giving in prison. So tonight's message is going to be on a book I wrote called Giving, What the Bible Says About Helping Others. Part of that, after I explain my background and why I wrote the book, I'm actually going to read you 5 specific devotionals that's included in the book. The book includes 60 devotionals, but then you'll get a good feedback on why I wrote the devotional. My intent was to start a nonprofit helping inmates when they came out of prison. But when I was reading the Bible, I discovered the Bible clearly tells us that we have to take care of the widows. The Bible clearly tells us we have to take care of the orphans or the fatherless. So the nonprofit I hope to start, God willing, is helping widows, fatherless, and the incarcerated. When I was going through the devotional, I looked up every passage on giving and tithing and widows and fatherless. I discovered some additional passages on lending. And the additional passages said we are to lend to our fellow Christians, our people, God's people, at no interest. And that caused another idea, because that's what we have time in prison, is to start a nonprofit helping people that are renting, living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, start saving money towards a home. And that's what we're going to explain in the devotional. I'm going to roll the clock back all the way to the year 2003. I used to say, and I guess I still can, my name is Jack, and I'm an alcoholic. Our Friday night Alcoholics Anonymous volunteer is here, and he's heard me say that many times. I probably said it more than 1,000 times. My wife says, quit drinking or get divorced. So I quit drinking. But it was hard. I went to AA. I followed the 12 steps. My sponsor called me a dry drunk. I stopped drinking, but I didn't stop the reasons that led to drinking or caused me to drink. Most addicts I know are multi-addicts. I transferred all the reasons I drank to pornography. I was in the retail automobile business since 1983, and I went from finance manager, sales manager, general sales manager, and as manager I was the last one to leave to lock the door. While waiting for that last customer or two, I had time on my hands. My habit of viewing porn went to out-of-control addiction when along came the anonymous internet. However, I found out the internet is not anonymous. If you were ever to search my name, you will find that I pled guilty to possession of child pornography, but the crime was actually 5 minutes. 3 emails, 5 minutes apart. I guess I'm going to ask a question of the audience now. How many have heard curiosity killed the cat? I'm the cat. A year later, they being in the FBI, traced that email I sent in 2003 to my computer at work. I signed a full confession in 2005 because I deleted all the images. I realized they were wrong. Delete, 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 delete. It stays on your hard drive. I signed a confession in 2005. In 2007, a different U.S. attorney found my confession and says, charge him. So in 2007, I faced a charge of possession of child pornography from way back in 2003. I pled guilty, was sentenced to 42 months. I returned from prison 33 months, went to the halfway house, went on home confinement, became a citizen again, but I was on probation. Part of the terms of my probation were to have a monitored computer and go to mandatory therapy. One of the homework assignments from my therapy was to post your past triggers where you could see it every day. Well, obviously, child pornography has different triggers than regular pornography. I had a 16-year-old son at the time that would visit me during the week. He'd stay with me on weekends, so I couldn't post him and put him on my fridge. I couldn't post him and put him on my mirror in my bathroom. I chose the search bar on my computer to post past triggers. So hold that thought. My probation officer monitoring my computer saw those past triggers and assumed I went there. So on her computer, she typed in those past triggers and actually went to those sites. Here's where, again, I need audience participation. Everybody hold up their thumb. What I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to turn around, grab your thumb and wiggle the top so you can see your thumbnail. Why I asked you to do that, my probation officer found 7 illegal images the size of your thumbnail in my unallocated temporary file. My monitored computer took a picture of everything that I viewed. I never viewed those images. The monitored computer tells you exactly where I went. Well, I was arrested for possession of child pornography while on probation. Thrown in county jail. I spent 25 months in county jails fighting my case. The first offense, the possession, the grand jury looked at the evidence, threw it out. There's not enough to charge him. I said, good, I'm going home. The second grand jury indicted me for attempting to possess illegal images. I emptied most of my 401k, got a high-priced attorney, hired 2 computer experts. We were ready in September of 2012. I got arrested in 2011. We were ready to win at trial because we can show the computer never went to these sites, never attempted to possess any of these 7 images that I never saw. 11 days before trial, the government dropped that charge. I said, good, I'm going home. Nope. They went to a third grand jury, and I was indicted for intending to view illegal images, which I never knew was a crime. Again, we got the high-priced attorney. We were ready to win at trial, except they showed those 7 images to my jury of my peers and told them that I viewed them, which was a lie, but I was not able to get the evidence to show the jury that they were never viewed. Long story short, I was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I thought, good, I can win on appeal. No. That's how I became a legal beagle in prison, because I spent every spare hour in the law library reviewing cases. At first, I wouldn't say bitter, but I was disappointed. 15 years is a long time in federal prison for 7 little thumbnails that you never saw. My mother, she's 88, she lives in California. My dad died when I was in prison, said, Jack, maybe God sent you there to be a missionary. I went, huh. So then I started taking classes, promoting, learning the Bible. Charis is what they call it in Minnesota. It's just like Kairos here in Michigan. They have outside volunteers that lead a worship service. Spirit-filled. You get goosebumps on your arm. I took a job at the chapel library. I was the head librarian, so I had all this time on my hand. One of the things I did is I researched every Bible passage I could find on 52 topics. So one of the books I wrote in prison is 52 Ways Iron Sharpens Iron. It's written by a fellow porn addict to men that are tempted with pornography or addicted to it. I got done with that, about a 4-year process, and I still was in prison. Crossroads Bible Ministry is, I got a pamphlet on everyone's table. It's a mentorship program. If any of you are willing or able to become a mentor, take this home. It shares how you can be a bridge to those in prison, and it explains the hope you can give a person. So I took all these Bible courses, and I think there was 43 of them that I took. There was a series on giving, and that opened my eyes. I went, huh. So that's when I got the idea of starting a nonprofit, and I started researching every passage on giving that I could find. Yesterday morning, I shared 4 examples of how I was able to help people in prison. I'm going to re-share 2 and give you 1 new one so you can get an idea of my background before I share my message. There was an inmate named Hector Lopez. He was 23 years in prison when I met him. He was age 19 when it was a drug deal that went bad, and it was either kill or be killed, and there was murder. So he ended up with 2 life sentences, no parole. I knew him from my AA group in prison. He came up to me in chapel and says, "Jack, I hear you do legal work. Can you help me?" What am I going to say? No. So I said, "Sure." And I read all the stuff, and I did some research on the law library. I says, "Hector, I think we can do something." They called post-conviction rehabilitation. In 23 years, he did a stack of programming that much, and he became a mentor for other inmates. The other thing I found was sentence disparity. For someone age 19 to get a life sentence, they don't do that anymore. The maximum sentence he would have got if he was sentenced today is 30 years. Well, he was already down 23 years. So I wrote a motion to the court. The government objected, saying he's a menace for society because he committed 2 murders. And I wrote a letter back to the judge, "But Your Honor, he's going to be deported upon his release from prison." Guess what? The judge agreed, sent him home. When I got out of prison, Hector called me from Mexico. Said, "Jack, thanks." He didn't get a chance to thank me because we were in the middle of a COVID lockdown. We couldn't talk to each other in prison. The other example I mentioned was Steve, and he, when I met him in county jail, he never even opened the Bible. I shared the book of John with him, had him read Psalms, had him read Proverbs. He says, "Hey, Jack, what's this book called Job?" I had to explain to him, "It's a good book to read, but it's Job." "But it says Job." I said, "It's Job." We had many discussions. When you're in jail, as many of the returning citizens know, there's nothing to do but time. I shared the scripture with him. Now, we parted ways. He went to federal prison. He stayed in contact with my mother, gave my mother's address. He wrote my mother and says, "Tell Jack I got baptized." And I went, wow. So God put me in jail to help one man who's never opened the Bible become a believer. Another example I want to use is, and this is something I didn't mention yesterday, is an example of a guy named Jay Orsak. We called him Cubby because he was a Cubs fan. He was serving a 20-year sentence for meth. He was the habitual criminal, third felony. He says, "Jack, can you help me?" He always called me Jack Groenendal, my attorney at law. But he was a devout Christian, on fire for God, had lots of faith, prayed, let our praise service out. Sure enough, I researched the law. Marijuana in his state was now legal. If he got sentenced today for that same crime, there would be no 3rd felony because marijuana is no longer a felony. It's a misdemeanor. We petitioned the court, same thing. He did all this programming, post-conviction rehabilitation, and sentence disparity. He went home 10 years on a 20-year sentence. And it's a man God put in my path that I met at the chapel. And the list goes on, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. The reason I share that is the whole premise of the book is helping one another. What can we do here in the room tonight? For those of you watching on video, what can you do? That Steve I mentioned, also life in prison. It was murder, but he was underrepresented when he went to trial. He had a public defender. All the returning citizens know we call them public pretenders because they don't really help you. He didn't get an expert witness. He didn't say take a plea, but he ended up going to trial and getting life in prison. He was like 21 or 22 when I met him. I think he has a very winnable case, or I think if he goes back to trial, he could win at trial. The gifts in kind portion of giving is paralegal, because I am not one. I'm a rookie at best. But if you are listening on the video and you're a law firm or an attorney, if we could find someone to donate pro bono, which they are supposed to do anyway, helping him find a expert witness, and I'm sure if we find an expert witness, we can help him. That's just one small example of how we in the real world can help someone that's incarcerated. The book I wrote, Giving, What the Bible Says About Helping Others, is set up to help two nonprofits I hope to start. One is called helpwifi.org. Wi-Fi stands for widows, fatherless, and incarcerated. The other nonprofit I hope to start is called Homes of Jubilee. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to read the introduction to my book. We're going to read a brief synopsis of what we sent to a company we're hoping to help us start Homes of Jubilee. It's going to be set up very similar to Habitat for Humanity. And then the third thing I'm going to do is read a synopsis we sent to them about Homes of Jubilee. At the end of 5 devotionals, I'm going to open up for questions and answers. Whenever I share this, there's always people with questions. So we're going to give you a chance to ask questions at the end. Again, the introduction says this. I do need my glasses. This book was initially written in federal prison with the intent to use it to support a nonprofit to help inmates who are returning to society. As you will discover, the Bible clearly tells believers to take care of widows and orphans. Thus, the nonprofit will help all 3 groups. Giving means more than just tithing, more than giving money to support your local church or any deserving nonprofit. God wants us to use our gifts and talents. This includes volunteering your time to help others, and it includes gifts in kind. Romans 12, verses 1 through 8, and this is from the New King James Version. Verse 4 says, "For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function." Verse 5 says, "Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given us, let us use them." The whole purpose of the book, the purpose of me talking tonight or to you on the video, is to show you how to use those gifts. Verse 8 says, "He who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness." 7 servicing gifts are mentioned. It says helps, mercy, faith, discernment, leadership, managing, and giving. Hopefully one of those 7 apply to you here tonight and you on the video. The book was written to show each believer exactly what the Bible tells them about helping others. The synopsis we sent out to get someone to help us start the nonprofit called Homes of Jubilee says, while partnering with, it says this, Homes of Jubilee will purchase lower cost starter houses in cash that require refurbishing, then offer lease to own options to selected church members. Guided by biblical principles, the organization will help the renters become homeowners. Each selected candidate will receive support from a 3-person panel. They're going to assemble a volunteer team, leveraging gifts in kind, sweat equity, while partnering with for-profit investors. Each church panel will use its own criteria and cast lots for those on a waiting list. This waiting list could include single moms, divorced moms with a deadbeat dad. It could be a key volunteer at that church. If you lead Sunday school every year for 10 years straight, but you're living in a rented apartment, paying check to paycheck, that church could select you to help you become a homeowner. But also it includes staff. Most people know the staff at a church are lower paid employees. They rent and they live paycheck to paycheck, never able to save money for a down payment on a mortgage. I'm going to give you an example. If the rent on a 3-bedroom apartment or home was $1,600 a month, Homes of Jubilee will collect that rent for $1,600, but put $800 in an interest earning account, good towards the down payment and closing costs on the house you're renting. Let me share it this way. If you're saving $800 a month, in 10 months' time, there's $8,000 saved up towards your down payment. Double that. 20 months, less than 2 years later, you now have $16,000 good towards the down payment and closing costs on that home. Here's what I found out. Leviticus 25:35 through 37 says, if any of your fellow Israelites, and I read that, if any of your fellow church members become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them so they can continue to live among you. Do not take interest. Verse 37 repeats this. It says, you must not lend money at interest. For those of you in the room tonight or watching on video, if you have the gift of giving, if you give to buy a home, the home will be your collateral. When they close on a mortgage, you're going to get all that money back. It's just interest-free. It is biblical to lend interest-free to those that are like-minded. The example I'm going to use tonight is a starter home that you can purchase in cash for $180,000. The inspector says it's going to need about $20,000 in refurbishing. So you got a $180,000 home and $20,000 to fix it up. Add them together, that's $200,000. One person or one foundation can lend the full $200,000 to buy it. Two people can lend $100,000 each. A group of people can collectively save up and donate $200,000 with their name on the title of the land. The renter's option is to buy that rented home at the actual purchase price paid plus the actual cost spent on refurbishing. Here's where you come in. Gifts in kind, sweat equity, you've probably heard that phrase before. If you help that renter do that work, instead of $20,000, it might only be $15,000. So he could purchase that home for $195,000. All this time, half that rent is put in a kitty, good towards the down payment. So as soon as he has $15,000 in that little kitty, now he's approved for a loan for $180,000 on that home. The title company does the paperwork, closes, and hands everybody back the same money they started with. I'm hoping they'll do it again. When we presented this to a company that's going to help us, hopefully, they said this. He wrote a book to support 2 nonprofits he hoped to start when he returned to society. However, his probation officer won't allow him to start either nonprofit. I can work for it, but I can't start it. Help them make Homes of Jubilee a reality as recognizable as Habitat for Humanity or Tunnels to Towers. His book includes 60 devotionals sharing specific scriptures that will inspire those with the gift of giving, those with the gift of helping, those with the gift of organizing, to help someone from a local church transition from renter to homeowner, to help widows, to help fatherless, to help the inmates as they return to society. So as I promised in my introduction, I'm going to read 5 specific examples out of those 60. The first one I'm going to share tonight is called, What is Your Gift? 1 Corinthians 12 verse 18 says, But now God has set the members, each one of them, in a body just as he pleased. End quote. The spiritual gifts are extraordinary abilities given by the Holy Spirit to build up the church. However, we are all called to serve one another, even if you don't have the gift of giving. That's from Galatians 5:13. All believers are called to minister to one another, and that's from 2 Corinthians 9:7. In my devotional, I'm asking the reader to read Ephesians 4:7 through 16. That's where the Apostle Paul shares us the spiritual gifts example. Verse 7 from the New King James Version says, But to each one of us grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Every one of you today in this room, everyone watching on video, has a spiritual gift. If you don't know it, ask someone to help you discover it. And here's 1 Corinthians 12, verse 18. And this is from the NIV, which is the New International Version. It says, God has placed in the church gifts of helping and guidance. The Message is a paraphrase Bible that I always use to help me make more sense of the passage. It says, quote, only as you accept your part of that body does the part mean anything. It lists helpers and organizers. You don't need to have the gift of giving to do either. Only a small handful of church members have the spiritual gift of giving, but everyone can cut one item out of their budget to give a little extra to a selected renter, helping them turn into a homeowner. Any project, just like Habitat for Humanity, needs helpers, organizers. Maybe your contribution is just to share that book with someone else that has gifts in kind that they can contribute. The question I ask is, who do you know? The second devotional that I'd like to share this evening is called Rules to Live By. The Old Testament in the Bible has many instructions from God. They can still be used today. What if we need volunteers? Maybe to write or email or text a missionary as an example. What if too many people volunteer and we don't want to hurt any feelings? I'm going to use Sue as an example. What if 5 people all volunteer to bring a big pot of something to eat? We don't need that much. So she could do as the Bible says in Nehemiah. Nehemiah 10, verse 34 says this. We cast lots among the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of God. Back then they used fire, and they had to gather firewood. You don't need every member of church bringing firewood to church, so they cast lots and say, you, bring us some wood. Most cities already have local jail ministries. On your table, I put down some brochures. One of them, and we're in that building tonight, is called Reach the Forgotten. When I was in jail for 25 months before my trial, it was called the Forgotten Man Ministry. So many things they did to help me individually. You, returning citizens, might remember what they did to help you. You can volunteer. Even if you don't volunteer your time, you can donate to them. One small thing they did was buy me underwear. Matthew 25 says, when did we see you naked? When did we see you in prison? Or this is a way to help. Even if you can't become a volunteer, you can help them by buying some socks or underwear or a t-shirt. The other 3 handouts on your table for you to take home one is called Hope. It says, share the hope of the gospel by becoming a Crossroads mentor. I think I mentioned to you that I did 43 different studies with Crossroads when I was in jail or prison. Each time I did one, they graded it and they sent me back with a handwritten note. One of my high school teachers told me he had 8 different people he wrote after he graded their papers. He can't pick who he selects. It's, again, random by lots. So he didn't respond to mine, but 8 different people he wrote. What if we volunteered? Instead of 8, now he only has to grade 4 papers or 6 papers because you volunteered to be a mentor. This book, or this pamphlet, is called Share the Hope. Be the bridge. You can do that when they're in jail, in prison. You can do that when they come out as a returning citizen. And Pastor John talks about being mentors. And lastly, again, this is something you can take home. It's another brochure about becoming a mentor at Crossroads. Again, when I was there, it was Crossroads Bible Institute. Now it's called Crossroads Prison Ministries. What about being a pen pal to someone in jail, state prison, or federal prison? Is God calling you to be a liaison to recruit people for that? To do that yourself? What about being a liaison to write letters to the incarcerated, or a liaison to write letters to a missionary? There is a safe way to do this. If you write someone that's in prison, my recommendation, and it's in the book, is to send it with the church's return address. and they will mail a response back to your church with your initials or your first name on it so that convicts don't con you. So we always say be safe when you're writing to inmates. A bonus passage I wrote down on the bottom says this. Proverbs 16 verse 33 says, "The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord." So if you do cast lots for whatever reason, God's the one in charge of that. The third devotional, I'm actually going to start with a bonus verse. I found this when I was preparing for this message. This is from Proverbs 31 verse 8. It says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, the rights of all who are destitute." I had mentioned a pro bono attorney, someone to help pay for an expert witness that wasn't at trial, that he could have won. Those are because he was destitute, he couldn't hire an expert and he couldn't hire an attorney. This lesson is marked, become a mentor. Can you be a neighbor to someone in need? Often families are scattered to help so they can't help their widow. My mother is age 88, lives all the way in Southern California. I can't help her trim her bushes or lift the TV to dust behind it. However, you can volunteer for the widow that's in your church, or the widow that's nearby your church, or the widow that's in your neighborhood, to help that widow in need. The Bible verse that supports this is Proverbs 27 verse 10. Quote, "Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away." Even if your budget does not allow you to tithe 10% yet, I say yet because that's our goal. Even if you don't have extra funds that you can, above and beyond your tithe, donate to a nonprofit, you can still become a mentor. One way you can help is to show someone how to live on a budget, to help someone improve their credit score. When I mention gifts in kind, it's a bank or a credit union or a mortgage company. They can donate their expertise to help you get approved for a mortgage. Fixing a person's credit, helping someone establish good credit, will allow them lower insurance costs, but a lower rate, which would save them thousands of dollars. Someone must first become a disciple before you can disciple someone else. So most of us in this room, not all, most of you watching on video have already gone through the process of establishing credit, buying a home. We're asking you to be a mentor to help a renter that's living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck doing the same. The Bible verse I mentioned is from Deuteronomy 15 verse 1. "At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release of debts." I'm not going to ask by show of hands how many filed for bankruptcy, but I was a finance manager. Even if you file for bankruptcy, after 7 years, your credit's wiped clean. When inmates come out of prison, they either have no credit or they have bad credit with collections and bad debt. You can help that person reestablish his credit so he can qualify for a mortgage. Every one of them coming out of prison need a mentor. I know Pastor John's trying to start a mentorship program here at Crossroads Bible, or at the Central Bible Ministries. If you are a widow yourself, if you're a single mom or a divorced mom, if you are living within your means, you can mentor others to do the same. Fourth devotional, 2 more. The title is The Value of a True Friend. While in prison, we had a group of volunteers near the prison that volunteered once a week called Charis Ministry, and we've had testimonies of that. Each volunteer would sit down with 8 to 10 inmates, and they'd go over the sermon. They would share prayer joys, prayer concerns. If your local jail or prison uses volunteers, consider volunteering. If you do, you will be blessed. I know there's 2 people here from my Friday night group, and I know you know that there's a blessing when you help someone. And I just want all of us to experience that, especially if you're watching this on video. The group that came to prison shared a saying. He says, find a friend, become a friend, bring a friend to Christ. I'm going to end my message with that, an example. One of the sermons I heard, and I wrote it down, and I thought it was good, so I'm sharing it now. I can't remember the pastor, so I can't credit him, but it says, bring them in, build them up, send them out. Everyone reading this devotional can become a true friend of a widow, of a single mom, of someone who is incarcerated. It's hard to be all alone. Ecclesiastes 4, 8 through 12, and this is the New King James Version, says, 2 are better than 1. Verse 10 says, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, and he has no one to help him up. End quote. This book is written to show that each one of us here in this room tonight, watching on video, each one of us can help others by offering a helping hand as a friend. Ask a single mom how you can help her. Ask a widow if she has a job jar that you can help with. Help a returning citizen. Find an affordable used car. Help them get a job, or if they have a job, most of you guys understand, help them find a better job. Help them find a career job. Become a valued friend. My last devotional is this. Are you a sheep or a goat? And this is from Matthew 25, 31 through 46. I'm sure all of you have heard a sermon on it. I am asking the reader to stop what they're doing and pick up and read all the verses that support this passage. I'm not going to do that tonight for time. Verse 36 says in the NIV, I was in prison and you came to visit me. End quote. Because I served my prison sentence hundreds of miles away, I did not receive many visits. I did receive hundreds of letters from people from my church, family, Christians. I'm going to pause this. While I was at the prison in FCI Sandstone, which is northern Minnesota, they determined my diabetes is now out of control. My blood sugar was over 400 and my body was starting to shut down. I needed insulin. But they were not a stage 2 medical facility, so I had to be transferred. It was during the COVID lockdown. So they finally found a prison all the way in El Paso, Texas, where I could get transferred to. So watch this. I first had to spend 2 weeks in isolation at Sandstone to make sure I didn't have COVID. I transferred to Terre Haute. Well, there was a COVID outbreak in Terre Haute. I had to stay there for 4 weeks until it was clear that I could go to the federal transfer center in Oklahoma City. I spent 2 more weeks in Oklahoma City. So that's 2 months in isolation. However, I had an inmate. That was my partner. He's also going to El Paso. His name was Jesse. Jesse was one of those typical prisoners. Big, muscular, tattoos, always in trouble, fighting. I think his last shot was for making hooch. And those that are returning citizens, you know what I'm talking about. I shared my testimony with him. Not once, not twice, but he saw me reading the Bible. I shared with him what I was reading. Jesse is now writing a pen pal from our church. The lady that wrote me for 8 years. When I got out, I says, write to Jesse. I may have planted seeds, but she watered it. And I'll share that in my conclusion. So now I'm going back to the devotional. It says, I got at least 1 letter per month from a lady I never met when she responded to a prayer request from my home church to send me a Christmas card. I'm asking you tonight, in this room, those listening, ask a friend, ask a neighbor, ask a coworker or a fellow church member if they know anyone that's incarcerated. Again, have your return letters sent to the church. Just a letter sharing your faith, showing interest, can lead an inmate to Christ. What did Jesus say? Matthew 25, verse 40. Whatever you did for one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. 1 letter, 1 email can make a huge difference. When you get to know an inmate and stay in touch with them, you can then connect them to people to help them when they release from prison. Before I get into the question and answer period, I'm going to share that example about Jessie. My friend from church, she now writes 13 different prisoners, state and federal. She shared the letter that Jessie wrote, and I tear up every time I share it. Jessie was now back locked up in the SHU, which is special housing unit, in isolation. He wrote to my friend from church and says, I'm ready to commit to the Lord. I wish I had my own Bible. There's a NIV study Bible probably going to be there this week while he's in the SHU, so he can read it and study it. Again, I may have planted a seed. That friend from church watered it. God gives the harvest. And each one of you can do the same thing. I'm now going to open up to questions. It doesn't matter what question it is, if it's the nonprofit helping widows or fatherless or incarcerated, or if it's the one helping a renter living paycheck to paycheck become a homeowner. By raising a hand, if you have any questions, now is a good time. John.
You said that your rural officer would not let you start a nonprofit but would allow you to work for one. What's your argument for that?
John asked me the question. My probation officer wouldn't let me start a nonprofit, but will let me work for one. And he asked why that was. Again, the returning citizens already know this, but most probation officers think we're bums. They think we're going to steal that nonprofit money, put it in their pocket, buy a car, and scoot off on. So the funds that support a nonprofit, he does not want my hands to touch. But can I work for the nonprofit and they can write me a paycheck if I did? Yes. But I can't start one and have money sent to my home for donations. Any other questions?
I have one more other than that.
Okay. John asked, how do I get my awesome tan? John, I'm going to tell you this up front. I cheat. I got a membership to Planet Fitness, and while I do my workout, especially when it's sub-zero, I sneak into the tanning booth for 9 minutes and stand up and get a little suntan. But thanks for asking. Sue.
I got a practical question. I have a nephew who's in the local jail. How do you get a book to him or something? Can you send it?
Yeah. Sue asked a very important question. And every jail and state and federal prison have different rules and regulations. I'm going to share with you what happens in federal prison. They will not let you, an individual, send a book to prison. And I've seen it. They smuggle drugs in these books. Okay, I won't go into that detail. But Sue, if you take a look over at the wall there are books. Forgotten Man Ministries, or Reach the Forgotten Man Ministry, has a book cart in every county jail. One is secular, one is Christian. We get people that donate books. Matter of fact, Central Bible Ministries sorts them once a week. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. In other words, they put in every box and they bring it as a donation to that. If you wanted to send a book to someone in jail or prison, the best way to do it, and how the Bible got to my friend Jesse, is I called Barnes & Noble and put it on my credit card, and Barnes & Noble sends it direct. If it comes direct from the publisher or from a bookstore, they'll let the inmate have it because it's already saran wrapped from a business. It's not from you as an individual.
You have to check the specific jail because they may only even allow it to come from certain publishers.
So,
Only come from Amazon. And when it's Amazon, it can't come from Amazon fulfillment ancillary. It has to come direct. There's all kinds of rules.
and Dan is a formerly incarcerated, but he's from state prison. And every prison's different, so if you want to just call the Forgotten Man Ministry, they'll give you the specifics for the county jail.
He's in the ball, I mean. Is that local?
Yeah, that's Kent County.
Kent County?
Yep.
Sorry.
But anyway, so the whole...
That's the way they work. It has to come directly from the publisher.
Okay, any publisher?
Well, like Barnes and Noble and Amazon.
So the answer to the question is, if you're double sure, call, but it has to come from the person that sells it, not you yourself.
But I can pick it up.
Yep, you can select it and ask them.
You were talking about doing letters and stuff. There's an organization called Cards for Prisoners out of Groenendal. So if you're interested in sending a card once a month and on the birthdays and on the holidays.
What was mentioned was Cards for Prisoners is a local nonprofit here in Granville. What I have found when I wrote the book, every community, every city has other nonprofits that are set up to help returning citizens. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to say, is there a need here, and how can we fill this need here? So if we find a request to stay in contact with them for birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, that's a great way to do it. Some prisons, like mine, didn't even accept a card because of COVID. They have to photocopy the card and then mail it in. Yeah. So again, different rules apply. Any other questions? Great. You guys have been a great audience. I just want to say, give all glory and all praise to God. Give him a praise to him.